Hey Jay,
Hello.
good thing you reminded me. I completely forgot about the fact that it's Thursday again. It feels like I only spoke to you yesterday.
Yeah, it's too fast.
It's too fast.
How are you?
Good, good. I was in the middle of refactoring the provider stuff, the EF Core provider stuff,
Yeah.
which I consolidated into a single project. I just deleted a project, but then Mohammed was complaining about it, so I figured let's
Yeah.
just revert it. Yeah, he made good points. So easy to have a single project, but yeah, he did offer some valid concerns. If you pull in all of those different package dependencies, then it's gonna be painful to certain users and integrators.
I will try to find to retrieve one blog post on how to customize schema, but programmatically. I know this is we want to be able to change the schema name, for example, and run the migration automatically. And I think it's possible, but we need to make a good core class for this. And I have seen a blog post about this. I will try to retrieve it in my history.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would be very curious to see how they pull that off, because once you generate migrations and you configure the DB context options to use a specific schema, then that's hard coded into the migrations from what I've seen in the past. I'm not sure if exactly that's what happened, but that's what I remember. So yeah, that would be great.
But I'm thinking it's maybe it's some sort of hook when you will intercept the migration creation to be able to run it after.
So that's great if you are generating your own migrations. Or do you think it also hooks in at runtime? So as the migrations execute at runtime, you get to hook in. Oh, that would be fantastic.
And I have worked a lot on integration tests about service bus activity.
Yeah, you mentioned this. Do you want to show something?
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
So if you want to share a screen, we can just dive right into that. After that, I will show you stuff I've been working on with regards to alterations.
Okay. So I have created a new project with a different class to launch the test platform for to be able to test the service bus activity regarding sending and receiving message from outside, but with the ability to mock service bus. Okay, so we don't need to have a service bus connection string and a real service bus service in Azure, because everything is mocked in the unit test.
So I see a service bus client mock. So that's
yes. So with the service bus client mock, so I have create a manager. So yes, in the I have created a different manager. One manager to manage a service bus processor, and when I need to send or receive this, the service bus processor is for receive message from service bus. So I use the Azure Service Bus mock to change to hook the create processor and use a service bus processor test. And in this service bus processor test, which derived from service bus processor, I can send a message. And when I send a message, I use the base on process message async, and this will wake up the worker of Elsa, and he will think it's currently receive a new message.
Nice.
Okay,
that's awesome.
So with this, I am on the worker in invoke workflow async, and I can start a new workflow.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as this worker is concerned, it just receives a message from the service bus, and it's none the wiser that it came from test code from the mock.
I have created also a manager for test auto reset event to manage auto reset event. The idea is to be able to know where I am in the workflow. Okay, and for example, if I try this workflow, okay, so this workflow, I receive, I need to receive a message. So the workflow will suspend on this activity. Then in the unit test, I can send a message on this topic and subscription. And when the message is received, the activity right line will unblock the wait handle in the unit test.
That is brilliant. So this way you can write sequential unit test code that you can easily follow. Even though this thing is asynchronously waiting for messages, it will just wait, and this thing will then. That's brilliant.
So in the initialization of the test, because we are in unit test, I need to configure some lazy thing. For example, I need to create the singleton of background command host sender hosted service to be able to get it and start it.
Of course.
Because yes, I cannot just get it if I use the interface because there are hosted service. And so with this, after, here is the test. So I will initiate the different processor manager regarding which topic and subscription I want to listen. I init my different handle regarding my workflow configuration. I use your populate registries async to be able to use start workflow async. I understand that I cannot use run workflow async because when I use run workflow async, there is no store, there is no save async of the workflow in the store, so I cannot use any workflows that use the dehydration or suspend activity.
Right. Yeah, probably. Yeah, we would have to look into the implementation of start workflow async to see what's the difference. Maybe we need to fix something there to make it consistent.
And so once I start the workflow, I am on the first receive activity. So I check I am in a running and suspended state. If it's okay, I can continue. I start the worker for topic name and subscription name, and using the manager, I get the service bus processor and I send the message. Once I send the message, I will wait for the receive one handle. This handle
with a timeout, right?
Yes, with a timeout. It could be very little, but I set a timeout. And with this, I can wait for the after the first receive. Then I wait after the second receive. And in this test, I have two receive, but I send only one message. Okay, so normally I need to get a workflow in running and suspended state because the workflow is waiting for the second message, is the second receive. If we look this one, I should be blocked in this activity. Okay.
Well, hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on. Go back to your workflow. Didn't you mean on line 26 message received that would cause the workflow to enter the suspended state because message received creates a bookmark and then it waits there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It should be.
Yeah. No, you highlighted right line, I think. So I was
okay,
confused.
sorry. So if I execute this message to receive something what should block, so the test is false because I am in state running and I expected to be running and it's finished. I already write something on the issue, published on GitHub. I know why this is wrong. And
oh, you know the reason it's entering the finished state?
Yes, it's because here we are looking for an input in the context, an input name transport. Wait, where is this? Yes, transport message. Okay. When I first receive a message for the first activity, receive activity, this input is not existing. I create a bookmark.
Right.
Okay. I receive then the first message, and I resume the first activity. Then I'm going on in the second activity. It tried to get the input of the input key, and this input already exists due to the first activity.
Yeah. Okay. Because in your workflow, you have two message received activities. The first one will receive the received message from the queue on the from the Azure Service Bus queue. So it will resume. Then the next activity is a write line, and then the next one is another message received.
Yeah.
And it will. Does it also receive the input, or it doesn't? Because it shouldn't.
It shouldn't, but because this property in context, this input in context already exists.
It's at the workflow execution context level.
Yeah.
So the input is still there. So the second one,
Yeah.
so when the first one is resumed, it has this message, and then the second
Exactly.
one thinks, oh yeah, I have it. Let's immediately continue and therefore finish. Yeah, I see. I see the problem.
So there is this. I have seen other thing here. There is a property here when we create a bookmark, which include activity instance ID. If we let the default value, so here that's we are in true, so it will include activity instance ID in the bookmark, and we will never be able to walk up the workflow.
Because you don't know the workflow. Yeah, the activity instance at that point. So for this case, we need to set it to false explicitly, because there are some cases where you do want it, like in the Telnix activities. But that has to do with the way webhooks are set up and the payloads receiving that information. But here you don't want to include it.
But I think it's we need to reroute some elements of in the service bus activity and worker, because the idea is to be able to receive any kind of message. For example, in a loop, also we can receive 10,000 of message from different subscription, and be able also to receive, if we have a parallel receive, we want to be able to receive the good message regarding specific property. For example, correlation ID is not sufficient.
No. You want to have some sort of filters, maybe the ability based on headers or maybe content in the body. And that this way you want to route it to the correct activity.
So I think it could be a good thing to be able to maybe customize the worker to be able to execute maybe specific filter or mapping between the Azure Service Bus message and the content of the bookmark, to be able to send to resume or start a specific activity with this filter. That's one thing. And the other thing is this test. So we discussed a lot about the race condition of sending a message and receiving a response before setting the bookmark. I have read just before the call your mention about this for the event in Elsa 3 with the workflow inbox message. So we need to use also workflow inbox message in the worker, if I understand well.
That's right. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah, the Azure Service Bus module hasn't been updated with the workflow inbox API, so you are correct. It needs to be applied there still. And just getting back to the filter thing, currently the way to do that is, let's say you have your message received activity and you want to filter on maybe a specific header. If so, let's imagine we have a UI where the user can enter the name of the header and maybe even a value. So that means only when a message comes in matching that header and that value. In order to make that work, the message received activity should create a bookmark with this information. So the message received bookmark payload needs to be updated as well, so that it can store the information provided at the activity level. In this way, it would then create a bookmark with those values, and that's then a way to match. And potentially there can be multiple bookmarks that have to be created by the message received activity for the various settings that the user creates. And the idea is that as a message comes in, we recreate the bookmark, reconstruct the bookmark payload using the incoming values, and then a hash will be computed matching, if any exists, the correct bookmark.
So for this, in the worker, we need to be able to retrieve the logic set up on the activity to map the property of the service bus message before creating the bookmark and find the corresponding bookmark in the store.
Exactly, but you wouldn't have to read the activity properties there. I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to. In Elsa 2, that was a common practice where you needed to read the settings of an activity in order to reconstruct the payload. Here, you would just construct the payload and then it would match or not. If you did want to read settings off of the message received activity, that's not easy to do because it would involve having to load the workflow definition and then finding the correct activity, and then evaluating its properties and then seeing what the values are. That is possible, but not necessary. The better way to do it is to include this information as part of the payload. And and this can also be used to carry on additional information that you do not want to use as part of the hash calculation. You can exclude properties from being included in the hash using an attribute. So if you need to find some information of an activity, the activity needs to provide it as part of their bookmark payloads or the trigger payloads. But I'm not sure if that's what you were asking about.
Yes, I've seen some element. There is a filter apply and bookmark, I think. Bookmark filter. Yes, the idea is to just specify what we want to be on one of these cases. That's right. That's what you mentioned when we can use, for example, the hash, and maybe one thing I don't understand is how the worker will know that, for example, in the specific subscription name, there is one workflow and one activity in this workflow which is looking for message with this specific value.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe I can find an example of a similar scenario, even though it might be a different activity. Let me share my screen. And
yeah.
So here is an example of the incoming call activity, which is also a trigger slash blocking activity. And this activity can be, so its functionality is as follows. So imagine you want to create a workflow that gets triggered when somebody calls some phone number. And then and this activity allows you to filter on a set of phone numbers, or maybe using a wildcard to accept any phone number that was used to to create the inbound call. So this will be a scenario where you are a customer support service center and you have a bunch of numbers that customers can call, and then some certain numbers you want to route to certain workflows, and then maybe you have a catch-all workflow that catches any other number. So the key point here is that this activity can be configured with multiple phone numbers to listen for. So that's this field here. So it's a collection of strings. So these are inbound phone numbers. In order for the system to understand which activity to match and which workflow, we need to include this information in the bookmark payloads. So here, when I create bookmarks when this activity executes, and actually also for the trigger. So this is, of course, when it's used as a trigger, you will have to implement get trigger payloads, and then it gets the payloads, but it's the same for bookmarks. So it's called twice here, and they go into this function here. So here I'm getting the list of all, this one, the list of all inbound phone numbers, or the target phone numbers that are being called. So let's say I have two numbers. Let's use simple phone numbers, just 1 and 2. Then I will create 2 bookmarks for those numbers. So here I have a for each loop. For each item in the 2 collection, I create an incoming call to bookmark payload. And notice that I'm including this phone number. So so if I have 2 phone numbers, there will be 2 bookmarks. And now we'll look at the code that actually triggers this activity in a second. But let's take a look at the implementation. This is the only field it has, the phone number.
Okay.
All right, so let's see where it's used. So here there is a thing called trigger incoming call activities. So what is this thing? It's basically it's a notification handler. So this is a mediator handler that handles the Telnix webhook received domain event, and this in turn gets invoked from an HTTP endpoint that is invoked by Telnix, which is a telephony as a service cloud provider. So that service calls some API endpoint that I have, and internally I dispatch these events using mediator, and this is one handler listening for this thing. So, and as you can see, it's looking for what is the payload, what type is it? If it's not a call initiated payload, then exit. If it's not an incoming call, then exit. And then here I'm gonna try and construct, or try and determine what workflow to trigger and what workflows to resume. So part of that process is getting the activity type name. That's the incoming call activity. Then some inputs just to provide some information about the event specific to this scenario. And then here, this is the interesting part: trigger all workflows matching not the from number, but the to number here. And of course, in principle, it's the same, and it will be conceptually the same for Azure Service Bus. Here we are talking about from numbers to numbers. For Azure Service Bus, you would be talking about headers and content specific things. But let's focus on the two number here. So here I get from the received payload the number that is being called. Then I'm reconstructing the bookmark payload using this to number. And then I'm gonna submit it to the workflow inbox. And what I'm providing is the activity type name that's important, the bookmark, this thing, and some input. And of course, this will be used to calculate a hash, and that hash is then used to perform a lookup in the bookmarks table. And as I've just explained, there will be two such records, and one of those records will match. And of course, one of those records will, well, both records will be pointed to the same activity in this instance, but if you would have one bookmark pointing to a different activity, that's the activity that will be triggered. So in the case of an Azure Service Bus message received event, if you have two such activities on the workflow, one of them will be configured with, let's say, header x equals foo, and the other activity will be header x equals bar. Both will create their own bookmark, but as the message comes in, you reconstruct the payload using the header name and whatever the header value is that is being received. That will produce a hash, and that hash will then match one or the other activities, or none at all if the value doesn't match.
Okay, and so I can use the input property of the here of this submit async to pass the message.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so indeed, in the case of Azure Service Bus message received activities, the input would be the message, the raw message you receive from the Azure Service Bus API.
Okay, so I see the point. So the idea is to use workflow inbox, use notification layer in the worker. Finally, I have to use in the worker change the code to use to send, for example, a notification, or use the code inside this
yeah, so this is optional.
handler.
You don't have to use notification handlers. That's just a way to decouple bits of code. You can, of course, if you wanted to, not saying it's a good idea, but if you wanted to, in the worker itself, it could directly call into the workflow inbox. That will be fine technically.
I think I will try first using directly workflow inbox. Why? Because can I have no result? Yes, it could be possible. I can have no result in the inbox.
What do you mean no results?
I receive a message from the service bus, but no one is subscribing for this bookmark or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the answer is yes, you can indeed just submit a message, an inbox message, which will result to nobody being responding, which is very similar to, let's imagine we don't have the workflow inbox. Then the situation is the same. You receive some message, you're trying to find a matching or set of matching workflows and or workflow instances to resume, but it's quite possible that nobody listens, nothing matches. So then it will be ignored. But of course, in this case, even though it's the same is true for the workflow inbox, the workflow inbox will persist the message. So it will sit there for a while, but there's a cleanup process that will just discard messages that aren't picked up. And this threshold value is configurable. I think it's by default 1 minute or so. So what you will see is if you get many messages but nothing matches, the workflow inbox will grow, but then it will be cleaned up.
Okay, because the idea here is today in the receive implementation and the worker, when we receive a message and submitting this message in the engine, if no one needs this message, the message is forgot. We lose this message. And I need to check what we can do, we can send this message in dead letter queue in the service bus, and let the user, the developer, work on this. And if the message is in the workflow inbox just before the cleaning, we need to get some information about the message to be able to alert someone about some message will be lost, and we need to do something.
Yeah, that's a great point. In Elsa 2, the message, I think, is always acknowledged. So if a message from a queue is delivered, but then the worker doesn't find any matching workflows to resume or to start, the message is just, acknowledged and will be lost. And that's not ideal. And so I think what you're saying is we then need the ability to maybe move it to a dead letter queue, or maybe put it back in the queue, as in not acknowledged, right? Maybe you only want to acknowledge the message if indeed there was a workflow handling it, and maybe this behavior should be configurable at the activity level.
Yes.
Because maybe there are scenarios where you it's okay to discard the message, mark it as acknowledged, and removed from the queue, even if it didn't match any workflow.
Yes, but it's a little bit difficult because it's like the snake and the queue, because here with the workflow inbox we had a new layer of to be able to store bookmark and be sure that we never lose something. But when we submit on the in the workflow inbox, we lose the link with the service bus message, and we cannot suspend it.
That's true. You will have to acknowledge the message, because it is being handled. It's there in the inbox. So from that point of view, from the service bus point of view, the message has been acknowledged. So you cannot unacknowledge it anymore at that point.
Yes.
So maybe the fact, the using the workflow inbox or not, that maybe that should be conditional within the worker based on the settings. But that's going to be tricky, because the workflow inbox is also used to locate the bookmarks. So to locate the workflows and the bookmarks based on this payload. So you would have to basically do whatever logic is there in the submit, basically what you already have in the current version of the worker, which builds a bookmark and then tries to, using the workflow runtime, to trigger workflows, which will give you information. Well, actually, before you get to that, you first need to locate the bookmarks and or triggers, inspect the settings. So if the settings say auto acknowledge, for example, if that's set to true, then you use the workflow inbox to actually put the message there. If it's set to false, then you need to immediately try and trigger the workflows using the constructed bookmark. And then depending on whether any workflows were affected, you acknowledge the message or not. So it's a little bit more involved.
Okay, I think I will work on this. And can we hook message before they are clean in the inbox?
Sorry, come again?
Can we hook the message before they are clean in the inbox store? Before the cleaning process?
You want to hook into the cleaning process?
Yeah, because if some maybe in the process to be able to put some message in a dead letter or something else, or alert
I see what you're saying.
lose message, I need to know, okay, there is some message that will be cleaned in the workflow inbox. It's not a normal situation. Every message should be consumed. So I need to do something with the deleted message.
Yeah, makes sense. Not sure. Let's have a quick look to see if there's a event being raised. So here is a hosted service, a background service.
Okay.
And then whatever interval is configured, it will clean up expired messages. And then it's gonna call into workflow inbox store. So no, there's currently no hook or no event being exposed, but that will be easy to add. And I think that's a good idea to add based on what you just explained. Yeah.
Okay.
One more input that we may consider. I just mentioned the telnix thing again. Oh, incoming call. Here you go. So, and then we were looking at trigger incoming call. Yeah, so we just talked about maybe based on the setting on the activity, we first need to, the very first thing to do is see if there's any matching bookmark. If
Yeah.
so, then the bookmark may contain settings, whether to use the inbox or not, or whether to auto acknowledge, yes or no. And then use the workflow runtime to actually trigger the workflows if auto acknowledge is set to true or false, I mean. And if it's set to true, then you can use the workflow inbox. But maybe we can add settings to this submit call here as an additional argument or whatever, where you can configure it from this point on, so that you can set a flag whether to persist the message or not, or maybe some lambda, some callback here that you can use with custom code, so that the submit async method will first invoke this callback, and then you can determine whether you want to persist the message or not. So in this logic, you could then inspect the matching bookmark payloads, which contains these settings, and then you can do something else. So it would prevent you from having to duplicate the logic that it also is doing here, like submit will create a bookmark message and then send a notification, workflow bus inbox message received, which is handled.
Oh, okay. So if I rephrase, you say that it could be good to know that there is a corresponding element in the inbox to be able to acknowledge or not directly using a lambda.
Yeah, and
okay.
And even so look at this workflow inbox dot broadcast. This is what this will do. What this will do, it will actually then trigger the workflows. So and here it's internally, it's of course using the workflow runtime. So my point is that the inbox mechanism already does the things that you would have to do explicitly from the worker. So in order to prevent this code duplication, maybe we can expose a callback so that if, for example, if resume workflow async is invoked, let's see what it looks like. You see it returns a set of, actually, what we want to do is not call resume or trigger, but one of the others. Let me see. Bind. This is what you would want to use. So scratch everything I just said. You will want to do this explicitly from the worker. You will want to set up a workflow filter to find workflows that can be started or resumed, because this is doing the same thing as trigger, and same thing as trigger, except trigger, it will not only find the workflows and return matches, but it will then also go ahead and actually call them. But you want to stick with this step here, find workflows async, which gives you a bunch of matches. You see it will find startables and resumables, and then what it will return is a workflow instance ID And if an existing instance exists, it will include the workflow instance that matches.
Mhm.
I think. I'm not sure. It's not used here. Yeah, and the payload. And this is what you would be interested in, because this payload you can then use to inspect the settings on the activity and determine whether to use the workflow inbox or not.
But yes, if the event is arrive too fast, I cannot find
That's the
anything,
downside.
so I have to use the inbox.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. So it depends on what you want to, what you want the behavior to be. If you want the behavior to be something like, I receive a message, but there's no workflows ready to handle it. So I want to not acknowledge the message and return it back to the queue. That's what could be an option, and then it will be delivered again, and then maybe the next time it will be there. Or you want to move it to a dead letter queue immediately. But if you have a workflow where there is this race condition or this timing challenge where the workflow publishes some message which triggers some system which responds with another message that your workflow is actually interested in, but if your workflow was too slow to actually create this bookmark, then it will have a miss. And in that case, you do want to use the workflow inbox, but then you cannot unacknowledge. But of course, what you just mentioned, being able to hook into the cleanup process, that could give you an opportunity to still move something or create some record somewhere at that point.
I think it's the best way to use the cleanup process, because what is interesting for me to have an inbox is everything is async, and we can probably dispatch everything and scale better than if we just release the message in the service bus, and if there is a big queue, the message could be loose or put in dead letter because it exceed the number of retry of attempt, and so it's not a good thing. And I think the inbox also, if we look at the actor implementation, the inbox is really something that will deals with the message sequentially.
Exactly.
So I think it's better to be able to hook some events after to be able to retrieve information or make a resolution. It's like an incident maybe, but we want to know what is doing in our platform and do some retry or some specific process or generic process to be able to be sure that every message will be treated.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it also simplifies things significantly.
Okay, I think I will. I already create a branch to work on this on my repo. I think I will share this in the Elsa 3 repo. I can submit directly a new branch with my role.
Probably it's easier to work on your existing brands because then you can try everything, integrally. So that's probably what I would do. Of course, for me as a reviewer, it would be easier to receive these changes in smaller packets, but it's also a little bit tricky. Well, what you could do is create separate brands where you just expose this cleanup handler, and then merge that branch into your other brands with the Azure Service Bus changes, so you can try things out and see if anything is missing, or maybe you need to make some changes. Then you can make those changes into the other brands again, and then once that works, you can create a PR for that
Yes.
for that change. Maybe that's better.
Okay. So okay. So I take some notes. So I will work on the receive activity to create a new bookmark process. In the worker, I will use the inbox, looking at the handler implementation in Telnix. And then I need to, in another PR, and take this in my service bus PR, add an event in cleanup process, and then work on this.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yes. Looking at the clock, we are in more than an hour. I do want to show the alteration PR, but I don't know how you're on time. If it's a little bit too late, we can skip it to next week.
For me, I can keep 10, 50 minutes again.
Oh, perfect. That's all I need. Then let's do it. Let me test this.
You listen for me a lot. I can listen for you.
I appreciate that. Thanks. All right, let me test this first. All right, so build succeeded. Let me start this one. Okay, so just a bit of context. The alterations module, what does it mean? It provides some functionality, some low-level services plus REST APIs to be able to manipulate a running workflow instance. So let's say you have a workflow instance and maybe it's suspended or maybe it's faulted, or well, maybe an incident happened. So the status is still running, but with incidents. And now maybe you want to, fix the root cause of the incident, and then retry that workflow instance. Maybe part of this fix is making a change in the workflow definition, which would create a new workflow definition version. So as part of being able to retry your workflow instance, you also need to upgrade it to that newer version. And maybe another reason for the issue was an incorrect value of a given variable. So maybe you want to change the value of this variable and then retry the workflow. So what I just mentioned are 3 types of alterations, and I will show you the documentation to have it on the screen. So here we have alterations, and so basically you have an alteration which are it's another word for instruction. So we have a modify variable instruction, a migrate instruction, which will migrate the workflow instance to a new version, and the schedule activity instruction, which allows you to basically move around the execution pointer, if you will, back a few steps, or to whatever position you want in the workflow. So with these 3 things, we have a solid foundation to build more tooling so that you can do these things from the UI. So ultimately, what you want to be able to do from the UI is look at a faulty workflow instance, visually or using the UI to change a variable, and that action would then create an instance of modify variable alteration. And then maybe another action you would take in the UI is positioning a cursor or the execution pointer to some activity, and that would then create a schedule activity alteration. So basically what you're doing, you're building up a set of instructions that you want to execute once you're done configuring this set. So we don't have this UI yet, but we do have the APIs to basically perform these actions. So let me show you. In order to show it, I will create a simple workflow, which will be allowed to continue if an incident occurs. So it will not enter the fault state, it will continue running even if an exception occurs. All right, so let's mark this not as a trigger so that it's just a blocking activity. Let me also create a variable. So we will not configure every activity, but just a few. So event will be set to whatever. This one will set to a JavaScript expression called get variable1. That's the variable we just created.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be a problematic bit of JavaScript which throws an error. All right, so what we have here is a workflow which forks into two branches of execution. This branch will lead into a blocking activity. So here it will just wait for the event to occur, if ever. And this branch will run into this problematic JavaScript activity. So let me run this. All right, so this here it's pending, and this one we can see that it hasn't executed yet, but there it's red, which means something happened here. And we can see also in the log here that an incident occurred here. We can filter quickly on it using this button, and then we can inspect the issue. So we see that there's an issue with the JavaScript. So one thing we could try is maybe we think it's a transient issue. We just want to give it another go. So that's where the alteration API comes in. So what does that look like? Here I have a bunch of endpoints. We'll focus just on run for now, which is a endpoint that allows you to send it a set of instructions, a set of alterations you want to perform on a given workflow instance, or indeed a set of instances. So you can do things in batch or in bulk, I should say. So in this case, let's just try setting the execution back to this write line and see if it works the second time, even though we're not changing anything. So I'm copying the workflow instance ID here, pasting it in here. We're not going to modify any variables, but we are going to schedule an activity, this one. So we will copy its ID. All right, and then we'll run this. The response shows the executed alterations and whether it succeeded or not. And maybe there were, if there's additional information, it will be found here in the log entries. But it was successful. So if we go back here, we see that this one indeed executed again. What we also see is another incident because obviously we didn't fix this issue. All right, so maybe the issue is that this message, maybe the variable is wrong. So we could give it another go. We could say, let's change this variable to something else. Maybe that fixes the issue. So here I'm gonna undo my changes here so that, because I don't remember the details, but here it is, modify variable. It as its configuration, you need to provide it with the variable ID and the new value. So what is the ID here? We don't see it. It's not easily exposed, so we need to go back to the editor and then edit the variable, and then we have this ID field.
Okay.
So we're going to make this easier, of course. But here we go. So here we have the ID. Here we're going to change this to hi J. And of course, let's not forget that we are going to reschedule this activity. Yeah, and workflow instance ID was this one. Oh, that's still the same. Yeah, okay. All right, let's try it again. So that succeeded as well. So the modify variable succeeded and this one was executed again. And if we click on this one, we also see that it indeed used the updated variable. And we see also here that the variable value has changed. So that's the modify variable alteration we can use. But it didn't fix the issue. We have a third incident now. Obviously, because we have executed 3 times, but it keeps failing here. So let's fix it. So let's remove the cause of the problem. So we're going to go to the editor, which is currently at version 1. So here we see the issue. here, we're gonna just remove this error. We're gonna publish this fix. So now we are at version 2. In order for the workflow instance to take advantage of this fix, we need to upgrade it from version 1 to version 2. Otherwise, we're gonna keep bumping into this problematic version of this activity, right? So for that, we have the migrate alteration. So first we're gonna modify the variable for no good reason, but here we do need to say type is migrate, and then I think it should be target version, and that's going to be version 2 in our case. And once we upgrade it, we're gonna try again from this activity. Although we could also just schedule this activity and not execute this one again, but we'll do it for this little demo. Yeah, just maybe the name was wrong. Maybe it needs to be Jeremy. You never know. So schedule activity. Let me just double check migrate if the target version is the correct field. All right, let's run this. So we see migrate succeeded, schedule activity succeeded, everything succeeded. Now, and this, of course, these are the alterations, but let's see if the workflow actually succeeded, and indeed it did. So we see now this executed, and it continued to this one here. And of course, the variable was also again updated. That's the response I was looking for. Thank you. And of course, the workflow is still suspended. It's still running because it's waiting for this event, which we could, publish if we wanted to using a different API, using events. And I think it was whatever. We don't need to specify any of this. Is this incorrect? Let me just do it like this then. It says okay. And the event was triggered, and that finished the entire, well, it should have finished the status. So there's a little bug. I think I remember this one. That's because of the incident. Yeah, this I still need to look into, but that will be fixed.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm just wondering how it works with loop, or with if we have a parallel for each or some activity like this?
Yeah. So let's create a new workflow, and then here we have looping, and we have a parallel for each.
Because for example, if we do a parallel for each, we can have, I don't know, maybe one iteration with an exception, and in each iteration you have two activities, and you want to resubmit the first activities, but how do you resubmit only the first activities of the iteration that work? Yeah.
Interesting. Let's see how that might work. I'm not sure if it works now, but we can figure out how it should work, and then that's a very, very good use case. So let's see. So here we are inside the body of the parallel for each. Now let's say that we have a decision to make here, and let's say that it says
banana, and we throw an F16.
Exactly. If get current value equals banana, then we throw okay. Oh,
but we need
actually, no. Yeah.
Yes,
just
true or
one
false.
step too far. Yeah, it just needs to be like this. This will return true, and then if it's true, we will throw an exception. Well, we want to be able to. Well, actually, we can fix it like this. So we'll say, and otherwise we will. Okay, so now let's see what happens. So we're gonna make sure this.
Yes.
Yeah, good. You were paying attention. Very nice. Okay, so what happened? Parallel for each, and it failed. So let's see. So it for the first item. So here we have a bunch of items, 3 executions, false, false, true, false, true, false, which makes it.
Okay.
So parallel, of course, it executed everything simultaneously, which is why we see all iterations. One of them failed. So we see this one executed once, this executed twice. So now we want to basically fix this issue here. So first let's fix that. Let's go back to the editor, and then we'll replace this one with, okay, so now we have a new version. Oh, well, we didn't publish the first one. That's tricky. Well, actually, it should be okay, because when we now execute it, the instance, yeah, it was already set at version 1, so no migration in this case is necessary because I didn't publish the version. I just tested it. So we don't have to migrate, but we still do need to be able to reschedule this activity or this activity, but only we don't want to go, we want to just retry this particular iteration.
Yeah.
So how would one do that?
Because the ID is the same. Because we use the activity ID, but the activity ID is the same for each iteration.
Yes, but we do have instance ID, and that's the activity instance ID. So if we click on this one, we see 3 executions. What we don't see here is the instance ID at a given execution. So that's one thing we should change, the ability to see the instance ID of a selected activity by clicking on this execution. And a few meetings ago, we did talk about changing this UI where you would be able to select the iteration from the, you remember, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but
so it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. But we don't have it yet, so we are still dealing with this thing here, the executions. So what we should do is you should be, maybe I'm just gonna add another column, and that column will display the activity instance ID, and then I'm gonna move this to the bottom or something like that. But in any case, that's one thing we need, the activity instance ID, and then we need to update alteration, specifically the schedule activity, where you can specify the activity ID if you want to, or an activity instance ID, and then it will know which one to resume. Because the nice thing is, this thing, every execution is actually an activity execution context. So so given that idea, we can locate the execution context and just reschedule that particular thing, and everything else will work out.
We if you click on the flow decision on the journal, you can add the activity ID.
Oh yeah,
the instance
of course.
ID. Yes. So
dude,
here,
you know the system better than I do. That's true. Yes, of course. So in this case, we want
02
this one.
Yes,
this is the instance ID.
So it changed. So it's good. We already can have the instance ID.
Yeah, we can get it already. So no real change is necessary, although it would, I think it would still make sense to add it just for convenience sake. But you're right, it's not necessary. There's a workaround. So the only thing really to add is the ability to do it like this as an option. Like this activity instance ID. And then this would be like this. In this case, we don't want to use activity ID. Yeah, and then it should work. One thing I need to double check is making sure that this particular activity execution context still exists in the workflow state as being serialized. Because by default currently, what it will do is when an activity execution context completed, it will not be serialized as part of the workflow instance, because it could easily and quickly blow up the workflow state of being serialized and increase the record size, of course. But since, oh, this didn't execute. Yeah, this is going to be interesting because this never executed, so there's no activity execution context. This succeeded 3 times, so there's no real reason for this one to maintain the activity execution context up to this point, because now that we identified this need for the ability to, retry, a specific instance, maybe I need to rethink that a little bit about the activity execution context still being, still needing them to be persisted.
Yes, because this is the same thing as the first example. In the first example, if you put some other activity after the run JavaScript activity, this is the same thing. The write line never occurred because the run JavaScript broke the workflow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But in this case, it will be okay, right? You don't need the activity instance ID. In this case, it was fine to just use the write line activity ID, and it would then create a new execution for this, or a new activity instance, and in the form of an activity execution context, which I think is appropriate to create a new activity execution context.
Okay.
But in case you want to retry an existing execution or an existing activity instance, you do need that activity execution context. But if it's not there, then there's no way to retry that particular iteration, unless we think about it a little bit differently. Like going back here. So maybe instead of using an activity instance to retry, maybe we just want to create a new activity instance, but using the I don't know, maybe the iteration number, for example, as an input, so that it will create a new activity execution context, but using the parameters of a given iteration. So in this case, that will be a numerical value as that we could then specify as an input.
Okay.
I'll give it some more thought, see what makes most sense. A disadvantage of what I just suggested is that somehow the schedule activity needs to.
I like instance ID because it works for every case.
Yeah, exactly. That's very generic.
Yes.
But it would potentially mean maintaining or persisting all activity execution contexts and not just the unfinished ones. And that would be, could be problematic, unless, because of course, well, 1 second, I'm a little bit unsure why we still see the error here. Oh, of course, that's why I removed the fault. So unless maybe this scope that we're looking at right now didn't finish. So as long as that didn't finish, maybe all of its child scope, activity execution context should also remain part of the system. And in that case, we still can clean up completed activity execution context, but also keep them in case one of the children didn't complete because it faulted, for example. I will do some experimentation and some thinking, so I think we can find a good way. But I agree, this will be the most elegant usage of schedule activity.
And okay, and I think you possibly will have some issue with the growth of context, because if you have a very large workflow, even if you think about scope, if you have multiple branch, and the last activity broke the workflow, you will need to get back to the first activity and keep all the context. So I think it will be difficult.
That's a good point. Yeah, and there can be many subscopes because
maybe one ID for this could be on the user side, to be able to not batch, but check, activate checkpoint, because the user know in this kind of branch, he can have some issue, and he will never retry before this checkpoint. And so the user takes responsibility about this.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. It's a little bit similar to being able to mark critical points, critical sections in the workflow where you want to make sure state gets persisted, for example, and this could be a similar use case. Yeah, definitely something worth considering, because ideally everything happens in a good way automatically. But if it means blowing up the size of the workflow instance document, then this would be a better idea.
Mm-hmm.
You are in control, and yeah. One disadvantage maybe is that, let's imagine you have a workflow in production, everything's going great, but then you never realize that some section could be problematic, and then things happen in production. Now you have this great alteration module to just tweak the things and retry this particular iteration, or so you thought, but you didn't check that checkbox, so you don't have the execution context to resume or retry. So
Okay.
that's just yeah. Anyway, but this is great. Thank you
that's
for
that's just another day in production.
just another day in production. That's right. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, this is great input. I have some more food for thought, and I will do some experiments. But thank you for this scenario. I hadn't thought of this one.
Happy to help. Great.
All right, then.
I think it was a good session.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let me know how you go with the Azure Service Bus stuff, and if you need any help.
Yeah, I'm fully on this right now, so you will have some element very quickly.
Sounds awesome. Looking forward to it. Then I guess I'll see you next week.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining, man.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.